The air in Spago Beverly Hills turned to ice as every diner's head snapped toward the commotion. A statuesque blonde woman, her designer dress clinging to her like a second skin, loomed over a table where a young black woman sat quietly in a modest navy blue dress. "How dare you speak to me like that?" Patricia Hartwell's voice was a venomous hiss, her diamond bracelet catching the light as she jabbed a finger toward the woman. "Do you even know who I am?" The restaurant held its breath. Then crack. The slap echoed like a champagne cork popping too loud, too violent. Phones lifted recording. Whispers slithered through the crowd. "Who is that girl?" Someone chuckled nervously. Probably got lost on her way to the bus stop. But Celeste Williams didn't move, didn't blink. Just let the sting bloom on her cheek, her eyes locked on Patricia's with something unsettling, not fear, but pity. Because in that moment, Patricia had no idea she'd just signed the death warrant on her own privilege. 3 hours earlier, golden sunlight spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Celeste and Adrian's Brentwood home, painting the bedroom in honeyed warmth. Celeste stood before her closet fingertips, brushing the navy fabric of her favorite dress. At 28, she carried herself with a quiet grace, no need for contour or filters, when your skin already glowed like polished mahogany, when your smile could disarm a room without a word. "This one," she murmured, slipping it on. The dress was understated, the kind of thing people like Patricia would overlook. But Adrian never did. From the bathroom the shower cut off, and her husband's voice, warm-edged with that Harvard-bred confidence, called out, "You almost ready love reservations at 7:30. Adrian Williams wasn't just a tech mogul. He was the kind of man who made billion-dollar deals before breakfast and still remembered to kiss his wife good morning. As Celeste fastened her necklace, a simple silver chain he'd gifted her after she debugged his company's flagship app. In one night, she caught her reflection. The woman staring back was a paradox soft but unbreakable, the calm before the storm. Back at Spago, the tension curdled. Patricia opened her mouth to sneer again when a new voice cut through the noise, deep, calm, and lethal. "Did you just put your hands on my wife?" Adrian emerged from the crowd, his 6'2" frame radiating a quiet fury. The room froze. Patricia's smirk faltered, and then plot twist. Celeste laughed, not a nervous giggle, but a rich, unapologetic sound. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, rising to stand beside Adrian, her hand finding his. "This isn't about me. It's about you thinking your Gucci heels make you untouchable." She nodded toward a waiter who hurried over with a tablet. On-screen security footage of Patricia accidentally dropping her purse near a black family's table last week, then screaming theft when their child picked it up to return it. The restaurant erupted. Patricia's face drained of color. And Celeste. She just adjusted her necklace, leaned in, and whispered something that made Patricia's knees buckle. No one heard what she said. But the way Adrian grinned, that told the whole story. The girl from Detroit's East Side, the one who'd shared a bedroom with 2 sisters and learned to budget before she could drive, now sat in the passenger seat of a Bentley, worth more than her childhood apartment building. Celeste traced her thumb over the stitching of her dress, the familiar cotton, a silent rebellion against the world they were about to enter. Adrian's hand tightened around hers as they turned onto Cannon Drive. "You know," he said, voice low, with a teasing edge, "if you really want to scare these people, we could show up in my old college hoodie and those sneakers you love." Celeste snorted, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. But then the valet stand came into view, and her stomach knotted again. As they stepped out, a woman in a feathered Dolce gown eyed Celeste's dress like it was a stain on the sidewalk. Adrian didn't miss it. His arm slid around Celeste's waist, pulling her close as he murmured, "Watch this." With deliberate slowness, he adjusted his cufflinks, platinum engraved with their wedding date, then turned to the woman with a smile so sharp it could have cut glass. "Evening, Margaret. That's quite the—" Creative ensemble. Tell me, do the feathers serve a purpose, or are they just to distract from your personality? The woman flushed scarlet. Celeste bit her lip to keep from laughing. Inside, the maitre d' barely glanced at Celeste before addressing Adrian. Your usual table, Mr. Williams. Adrian's grip on Celeste's hand turned possessive. Actually, we'll take the center booth, the one your boss reserves for special guests. The man's eyes flicked to Celeste's navy dress, then back to Adrian's icy stare. Of course. They were halfway to the table when a man in an overpriced suit blocked their path. Adrian didn't expect to see you here with... His gaze dragged over Celeste, lingering too long. New assistant. Adrian's laugh was cold. Funny Charles. Last I checked, I don't pay my wife a salary. The man's drink slipped in his hand. Then her. Patricia Hartwell weaving through the crowd like a shark scenting blood. Darling, she trilled, air-kissing Adrian's cheek while ignoring Celeste entirely. You simply must join us. The Carlyles are dying to hear about your merger. Adrian didn't move. We're celebrating tonight, just my wife and I. Patricia's smile froze. Her eyes finally landed on Celeste, scanning her from head to toe. How quaint. Celeste felt it then, the unspoken hierarchy, the way these people measured worth in labels and last names. But beneath the crystal chandeliers, something shifted in her. She straightened her shoulders, met Patricia's gaze, and smiled. Not the polite one she'd practiced in mirrors, but the real one, the one that had made Adrian fall for her in that Westwood cafe. Actually, Celeste said, voice clear as cut glass, we'd love to join you. I've been dying to hear how you explain that charity embezzlement scandal to your board. The table behind them went silent. Patricia's champagne flute hit the floor. And Adrian. He looked at his wife like she'd just rewritten the rules of the universe. Celeste's fingers tightened around her water glass as the blonde woman approached, the click of her stilettos like a countdown to confrontation. Up close, her perfume was overpowering, something floral and expensive that made Celeste's nose itch. Excuse me, the woman said, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. I couldn't help but notice you sitting here alone. Are you waiting for someone? The pause was deliberate, the implication clear. You don't belong here. Celeste forced a polite smile. My husband just stepped away for a call. The woman's lips curled. Ah, husband. She glanced pointedly at Celeste's bare left hand. She'd forgotten her wedding ring after applying lotion earlier. How convenient. Leaning in, she lowered her voice to a venomous whisper. Let me give you some advice, sweetheart. Girls like you don't last in places like this. The staff might play along, but we all know what you really are. A hot flush crept up Celeste's neck. Before she could respond, a busboy, a young Latino kid with nervous eyes, bumped into the woman's table, sending a bread basket tumbling. Clumsy idiot, she snapped, whirling on him. Do you have any idea who I... Enough. The word cut through the dining room like a blade. Every head turned as Adrian materialized beside Celeste, his phone still in hand, his expression thunderous. The blonde woman paled. Adrian Williams. She breathed, her demeanor shifting instantly. I didn't realize this was my wife. Adrian finished sliding into his seat with deliberate calm. He didn't raise his voice, but the quiet fury in it carried farther than a shout. Celeste, darling, remind me, what was the name of that charity gala you chaired last month? The one where we raised $2 million for underprivileged schools. Celeste met his gaze, understanding dawning. The Bright Futures Benefit, she said smoothly. Adrian nodded, turning back to the woman. Ah, yes. Strange I don't recall seeing you there, Linda. And yet here you are lecturing my wife on what belongs in this restaurant. He tilted his head. tell me, how much did you donate to educational equity this year? Or were you too busy buying another Cartier bracelet to pretend you care about anyone but yourself? Linda's mouth opened and closed like a fish. A nearby diner choked on their wine, trying to stifle a laugh. Then, plot twist, the young busboy stepped forward, his voice shaking, but clear. "Excuse me, Mr. Williams. My little sister goes to one of those schools your foundation supports. She got a full scholarship because of you." He looked at Celeste, eyes shining. "They named the new computer lab after her, said she was the reason they started the program." The restaurant fell utterly silent. Linda looked like she might vomit. Celeste rose from her seat, ignoring the stares, and extended her hand to the busboy. "What's your sister's name?" "Maria," he whispered. She smiled wide, real radiant. "Tell Maria her story just made my entire year." Adrian's phone buzzed again. This time, he didn't even glance at it. Instead, he signaled the sommelier. "We'll take your finest champagne, and a raise for this young man," he added, nodding to the busboy. "Turns out he's the only person in this room who actually deserves to be here." As the first flute was poured, Celeste caught Linda slinking back to her table, her white dress suddenly looking cheap under the unforgiving light. Adrian's hand found hers under the table, his thumb tracing her forgotten wedding ring, now safely back in place. "Told you," he murmured. "Everywhere I belong you do too." And for the first time all night, Celeste believed it. Celeste set her water glass down with deliberate calm, the ice cubes clinking like a warning bell. The restaurant had gone eerily quiet, every diner holding their breath. She could feel their stares, some curious, some hungry for drama, few sympathetic. The blonde woman Linda Adrian had called her smirked, mistaking Celeste's silence for surrender. Then Celeste did something unexpected. She laughed. Not a nervous titter, but a rich, full-bodied sound that echoed through the dining room. "You're right," she said, leaning back in her chair as if they were old friends sharing a joke. "I am out of place here." She gestured to her simple dress. No designer labels, no gaudy jewelry. Her eyes flicked to Linda's diamond tennis bracelet. No need to compensate for anything. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Linda's perfectly Botoxed forehead actually wrinkled in shock. Celeste pressed on her voice, carrying. "But since you're so concerned about who belongs here," she reached into her purse and pulled out a business card, sliding it across the table. "Next time your charity committee needs actual results, instead of just photo ops, give me a call. My foundation rebuilt 3 schools in Compton last year. What was your contribution?" Another overpriced handbag. The maitre d' chose that moment to arrive with Adrian in tow. "Is everything all right, Mrs. Williams?" Linda's mouth worked soundlessly. Celeste smiled sweetly. "Just making new friends." Then the twist no one saw coming. An elderly woman at a nearby table stood up, her cane thumping against the marble floor. "I know you," she said, pointing at Celeste with a trembling finger. The entire restaurant froze. "You're the one who saved my grandson's school." Her voice cracked. "They were going to shut it down, but your organization, you fought for those kids." Celeste's eyes widened in recognition. "Mrs. Alvarez." The old woman shuffled forward, ignoring Linda completely, and grasped Celeste's hands. "Miguel just got into UCLA, full scholarship. He says it's because of you." Tears spilled down her weathered cheeks. "I never got to thank you." A stunned silence fell. Then, from the back of the restaurant, someone started clapping. Slowly, at first, then others joined the busboys, the waitstaff, even a few of the well-heeled diners. Linda shrank back, her face a mask of horror, as the room's allegiance shifted visibly. Adrian stepped forward, at his voice cutting through the applause. "I believe you owe my wife an apology." Linda opened her mouth, but before she could speak, the restaurant's owner emerged from the kitchen, his face stormy. "Ms. Whitmore," he said coldly, "your reservation has been canceled, permanently. As Linda was escorted out, her Chanel dress suddenly looking ridiculous under the harsh lights, Celeste felt Adrian's hand slip into hers. She expected him to say something triumphant, but instead he just whispered, "You were magnificent," his voice thick with pride. And in that moment, surrounded by strangers who had become unlikely allies, Celeste realized something powerful. She didn't need Adrian's last name to command respect. She never had. The truth of that settled into her bones like sunlight, warm and unshakable. Celeste's fingers traced the edge of her water glass, the condensation cool against her skin. The restaurant had become a theater, and every patron held their breath, waiting for her next move. Patricia Hartwell stood before her like a gilded gargoyle, her designer dress and diamond earrings glittering under the chandeliers like armor. Then Celeste did something unexpected. She smiled. Not the tight, polite smile society expected, but a real one, the kind that had made Adrian fall in love with her in that Westwood Cafe 3 years ago. "Patricia Hartwell," she repeated, tilting her head. The same Patricia Hartwell whose husband's company just settled that racial discrimination lawsuit last month. The one where employees testified about being passed over for promotions because they didn't fit the company image. A collective gasp rippled through the dining room. Patricia's carefully constructed facade cracked. "How dare you?" Or maybe, Celeste continued, her voice gaining strength, "You're talking about those generous charitable donations, the ones funneled through shell companies to avoid taxes." She leaned forward slightly. "Tell me, does your husband know you've been using the foundation's funds to pay for your Botox?" The color drained from Patricia's face. A waiter dropped a fork with a clatter that echoed through the silent restaurant. Just then, a deep voice cut through the tension. "There you are, darling." Adrian materialized beside the table, his Armani suit jacket slung casually over one shoulder. He didn't even glance at Patricia as he took his seat. "Sorry that took so long. The Tokyo office needed reassurance after Hartwell Properties defaulted on their lease agreement." His green eyes flicked to Patricia for the first time. "Oh, hello, Patricia. I didn't see you there. How's Charles handling the bankruptcy proceedings?" Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. The entire restaurant watched in stunned silence as the socialite who had ruled Beverly Hills for decades found herself utterly dismantled. Adrian reached for the wine list completely unbothered. "Now, if you'll excuse us, my wife and I would like to enjoy our anniversary dinner." He turned to Celeste with a grin. "I was thinking we'd start with the caviar, unless," he added pointedly, "you think that's too extravagant for someone who grew up in Detroit." Celeste laughed, the sound like breaking chains. "Darling, I think we can splurge a little tonight." She met Patricia's horrified stare head on. "After all, we belong here just as much as anyone else." As the sommelier hurried over with their wine, Patricia stumbled back from the table, her designer heels suddenly unsteady. The whispers followed her all the way to the exit, growing louder with each step she took toward the door, and out of the life she'd always taken for granted. Celeste's palms pressed flat against the crisp white tablecloth, her breath coming slow and measured. The hum of the restaurant had died to a hush, forks suspended mid-air, champagne flutes frozen at lips. Patricia loomed over her like a vulture's satisfaction curling her collagen-plumped lips as she watched Celeste's resolve waver. Then a miracle. The kitchen doors swung open with a bang, and a familiar baritone voice cut through the tension. "There's my beautiful wife." Every head turned as Adrian strolled through the dining room, his stride effortless. But it wasn't just his presence that silenced the room, it was what he carried. A massive bouquet of blue hydrangeas. Celeste's favorite in one hand, and in the other, a framed photo from their wedding day, where she'd worn the crowd gasped the exact same navy dress she had on now. Patricia's manicured hand flew to her throat. Adrian Williams. Patricia. Adrian didn't even glance at her as he set the frame on the table. Funny running into you here, especially after your husband just lost his biggest investor. He leaned down to kiss Celeste's cheek, whispering just loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Nexus just pulled all our offices from Hartwell Properties. Racial discrimination clauses in our contracts, you understand. The blood drained from Patricia's face. Celeste felt the shift like a seismic wave the moment the predator became the prey. She straightened in her chair, Adrian's warmth at her back like a shield. Ms. Hartwell was just educating me on what belongs in this restaurant, she said sweetly. Perhaps you could explain our reservation to her. Adrian's grin turned dangerous. He reached into his pocket and slid a black card across the table. Not a credit card, but an engraved invitation. The owners asked us to consult on their diversity initiative. Seems they're tired of certain clientele making others feel unwelcome. His eyes finally landed on Patricia. You'll be receiving a revised guest policy in the mail. A choked sound escaped Patricia's throat. The framed wedding photo caught the light, showing Adrian gazing at Celeste with undisguised adoration as she laughed in that navy dress, the same laugh now bubbling up as she watched realization dawn across Patricia's face. The final blow came from an unexpected corner. The head chef emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron. Mrs. Williams, we've prepared the vegan tasting menu you suggested with those Detroit-style influences you mentioned. He beamed at her. Turns out your food blog's following includes half our staff. As the chef retreated, the dam broke. A woman at a nearby table suddenly stood, her Valentino gown swishing. I knew I recognized you. You're the literacy activist who spoke at my daughter's school. Another diner snapped their fingers. The foundation that saved the South LA Community Center. Patricia took an unsteady step back, her designer heels catching on the carpet. The room's energy had shifted palpably. Where there had been judgment, now there was awe. Where there had been exclusion, now there was belonging. Adrian pulled out Celeste's chair with a flourish. Shall we toast to new beginnings, darling? As they clinked glasses, the sound seemed to shatter whatever remained of Patricia's delusions. She stumbled toward the exit, her retreat punctuated by something Celeste had never expected to hear in Spago Beverly Hills. The spontaneous applause of 50 wealthy diners finally recognizing true class when they saw it. The slap's echo still hung in the air when Celeste slowly lowered her hand from her cheek. A single drop of blood smeared her fingertip where her teeth had cut her lip. The entire restaurant seemed to lean forward, breath held, waiting for tears, for retreat, for the inevitable collapse of the nobody who dared defy Beverly Hills royalty. Instead, Celeste smiled. Blood stained her teeth crimson as she rose from her chair with the grace of a queen ascending her throne. "Oh, Patricia," she sighed, almost pityingly. "You just signed your social death warrant." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Patricia blinked, her triumphant sneer faltering. "Excuse me." Celeste didn't let her finish. With one fluid motion, she pulled her phone from her clutch and tapped the screen. Suddenly, the restaurant's ambient jazz cut off, replaced by Patricia's shrill voice blasting from hidden speakers. "People like you don't belong in places like this. Everyone here can see exactly what you are." Gasps erupted as diners recognized their own voices in the background, laughing, egging Patricia on. The hidden microphone in Celeste's necklace had captured everything. "Funny," Celeste mused, scrolling through her phone. "Your husband's country club just voted to ban racist members last week." She turned the screen toward Patricia, showing a Twitter notification already exploding with the hashtag #SpagoSlap. "And look, your Tokyo investors just pulled out of Hartwell Properties." Something about toxic associations. Patricia's designer clutch hit the floor with a thud. Then the coup de grace. The restaurant doors burst open, and a silver-haired man in a police uniform strode in. Patricia Hartwell. His voice carried across the silent room. "We have a warrant for your arrest, assault, racial discrimination, and..." He glanced at Celeste's phone. Now witness tampering since you just threatened 3 staff members in the restroom. As the cuffs clicked around Patricia's wrists, Adrian finally reappeared, leaning casually against the bar with 2 martinis in hand. "Took you long enough, Chief," he called, handing 1 glass to Celeste. "We were running out of entertainment." The spell broke. The dining room erupted not in judgment of Celeste, but in outrage against Patricia. Women yanked their designer purses away as she passed. Men turned their backs. The maitre d' rushed forward with a comped dessert menu and an apology. Celeste took a sip of her drink, the gin crisp against her cut lip. She met Adrian's proud gaze and winked. No words needed. The message was clear. Detroit had just conquered Beverly Hills, and the revolution would be hashtagged. The moment the elderly man spoke, the dining room's atmosphere shifted like a sudden tide change. Patricia's head snapped toward him, her Botoxed forehead actually wrinkling in shock. "Excuse me," she hissed, her manicured nails digging into her palms. The man, dressed in a modest but well-tailored suit, stood slowly, his wife's hand resting supportively on his arm. "I said," he repeated deliberately, "this young woman was nothing but polite. You, on the other hand—" He pulled out his phone with a shaky hand. "Happened to be recording my granddaughter's birthday video when you decided to assault her." A collective gasp rose as he turned his screen toward the room showing Patricia's slap in perfect high definition. The video even captured her whispered threat beforehand. "Maybe now you'll learn your place." Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. Then, plot twist, the kitchen doors swung open and the entire waitstaff marched out in formation. The head waiter stepped forward, his voice trembling with barely contained rage. "Ms. Hartwell, we've all witnessed your behavior over the years. The racial slurs you whisper to the busboys. The way you snap your fingers at Latino servers like they're dogs." He removed his name tag with deliberate slowness. "We won't serve you anymore." The restaurant erupted in applause, but the real mic drop came when the owner emerged holding a framed photo Celeste and Adrian at last year's charity gala, being honored for funding scholarships for underprivileged students. "Ms. Hartwell," he said coolly, "your membership has been revoked." And as it happens, he nodded toward the elderly man, now hugging Celeste. "Mr. Whitaker here owns the building. Your little performance just cost you your lease." Patricia swayed on her stilettos as reality crashed down, the social media notifications pinging on every phone in the room. The investors already backing out of Hartwell Properties. The way even her so-called friends were now edging away from her like she carried the plague. Celeste, still cradling her stinging cheek, felt Adrian's arms wrap around her from behind. "Ready to go, Mrs. Williams," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her uninjured cheek. "I hear In-N-Out Burger is more our speed, anyway." As they walked out, past the applauding staff, the ashamed diners, the utterly broken Patricia Celeste realized something powerful. The slap hadn't been her humiliation. It had been Patricia's. And the video now going viral, that was just the receipt. The moment Patricia demanded the manager, the entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Then, in a perfect twist of poetic justice, the owner himself emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. Not the young manager Patricia had bullied for years, but Antonio Rossi, the silver-haired patriarch who'd built Spago's reputation over 3 decades. "Ah, Ms. Hartwell," he said, his Italian accent thick with disdain. "We've been expecting this moment." He snapped his fingers and a hostess hurried forward with an iPad. On-screen security footage of Patricia's entire tirade, crystal clear with audio. "My grandson installed new cameras last week. High definition. Very good microphones." Patricia's face went slack as the video played her sneering insults, the vicious slap her racist dog whistles about people knowing their place. The timestamp in the corner showed it had already been live-streamed to the restaurant's 2.3 million Instagram followers. Rossi turned to Celeste with a small bow. Mrs. Williams, on behalf of Spago, we apologize for this disgusting behavior. Your table will be comped tonight and... He produced a velvet box, a gift certificate for 20 private dinners. Bring your literacy students will create a special menu. Patricia made a strangled noise. You can't be serious after all the money I've spent here. That's just it, Ms. Hartwell. Rossi's smile turned icy. Your last 6 meals were comped by Mr. Williams, part of his acquisition deal when he bought controlling interest in my restaurants 3 months ago. The collective gasp could have powered a small wind turbine. Even Celeste's eyebrows shot up. Adrian hadn't told her about this particular investment. Patricia staggered back, as if physically struck. That's impossible. My husband would have known. Adrian materialized beside Celeste, holding 2 glasses of champagne. He handed one to the elderly man who'd defended Celeste. Charles Hartwell was too busy hiding his embezzlement to notice the sale. Speaking of which, he checked his watch. The SEC should be raiding his office right about now. As if on cue, Patricia's phone began buzzing violently across the table, dozens of notifications from news outlets about her husband's impending arrest. The final blow came when her diamond tennis bracelet, the one she'd bragged was worth more than Celeste's life, suddenly snapped, sending pearls of wealth scattering across the floor. Celeste took a sip of champagne, the bubbles crisp against her still tingling cheek. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. The way the waitstaff deliberately stepped on Patricia's fallen diamonds as they brought Celeste a complimentary dessert said everything. The manager's hands fluttered nervously like trapped birds. Mrs. Hartwell, perhaps, if we... Enough. A new voice cut through the tension like a scalpel. All heads turned as a striking black woman in a sleek pantsuit strode forward, her Louboutins clicking against the marble floor. I'm Alicia Grayson, legal counsel for Nexus Innovations. She held up a business card that might as well have been a grenade. And I believe you've just slandered my CEO's wife on camera. Patricia's mouth fell open. The manager looked ready to faint. Celeste recognized Adrian's top litigator immediately, the woman who'd taken down 3 Fortune 500 companies in court last year alone. Alicia didn't wait for a response before continuing. Let's recap. You assaulted Mrs. Williams while live streaming to 2.3 million viewers. Falsely accused her of being a con artist. And, she added with a shark-like smile, just admitted to knowing exactly who she was when you referenced her husband. She tapped her phone. That's premeditation. Adds 5 years minimum. Patricia's knees actually buckled. She grabbed the table to steady herself, knocking over a water glass that shattered like her social standing. Then, the final twist, the restaurant doors burst open again. This time, it was a camera crew from TMZ, followed by none other than the mayor of Los Angeles, who marched straight to Celeste. Mrs. Williams, we came as soon as we saw the live stream. He glared at Patricia. The city won't tolerate this behavior. Consider Hartwell Properties' municipal contracts terminated. As the cameras rolled, Adrian finally made his entrance, strolling through the chaos with 2 scoops of mint chocolate chip in a Spago logo bowl, Celeste's favorite. Sorry that took so long, love, he said, handing her the ice cream with a wink. Had to stop a few paparazzi from trampling the valet. Celeste took the bowl, pressing it gently to her cheek as she addressed the shell-shocked manager. I believe we'll take that private dining room now. She glanced at the TMZ cameras, then at Patricia's ashen face. And send Ms. Hartwell the bill for our anniversary dinner. Consider it her first installment on the defamation settlement. The restaurant erupted in applause as Adrian guided Celeste toward the VIP section, his arm protectively around her waist. Behind them, Patricia Hartwell, once the queen of Beverly Hills society, stood utterly alone, surrounded by broken glass, spilled water, and the deafening silence of a world that had finally seen her for what she truly was. The moment Adrian's name rippled through the crowd, the atmosphere in Spago Beverly Hills shifted like tectonic plates. Patricia's designer clutch slipped from her fingers, landing with a thud that echoed through the silent dining room. Her manicured hands trembled as she took an involuntary step back, bumping into a waiter who deliberately didn't move to steady her. Adrian didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Every syllable carried the weight of his billion-dollar empire. "Let me make this simple, Patricia." He removed his phone from his pocket with deliberate slowness. "You have exactly 60 seconds to apologize to my wife before I press send on 3 emails. He held up 3 fingers. One to the Beverly Hills Police Department with the assault footage. One to the Hartwell Properties Board about those creative accounting practices your husband thinks are hidden. And one, his lips curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes, to Vogue magazine, rescinding your Met Gala invitation. Patricia made a strangled noise. "You can't." 50 seconds, Adrian said calmly, tapping his watch. The restaurant had become a silent film, every diner frozen mid-bite, every waiter paused mid-step. Celeste watched as realization dawned on Patricia's face, her carefully constructed world crumbling in real time. The socialite's eyes darted to the exits, but 2 uniformed officers had materialized near the host stand. With 20 seconds left, Patricia's shoulders sagged. Her voice, when it came, was barely audible. "I apologize." Adrian leaned forward. Louder. And to her, "Not me." Patricia's face twisted, as if tasting something rancid. She turned to Celeste. "I apologize, Mrs. Williams." The words hung in the air hollow and insincere, but their impact was seismic. A server dropped a tray of silverware in the sudden silence, the clatter sounding like a gavel. Adrian slipped his phone back into his pocket. Too late. He nodded to the officers. "But thank you for the confession." As the cuffs clicked around Patricia's wrists, Adrian turned to the gawking crowd. "Everyone, please enjoy your meals on Nexus Innovations." He raised Celeste's untouched champagne glass in a toast. "To Karma." The eruption of cheers nearly shook the crystal chandeliers. But the sweetest moment came when the elderly man from earlier stood up, raised his own glass, and declared loud enough for TMZ's cameras to catch. "To the Williamses, the only royalty Beverly Hills actually needs." Celeste finally let the tears fall, not from pain or humiliation, but from the overwhelming certainty that no one would ever make her feel small again. As Adrian wiped her cheek with his thumb, she realized the mark Patricia left wasn't a wound. It was a badge of honor. The silence in Spago was so absolute, you could hear the ice melting in abandoned cocktails. Patricia's designer heels clicked frantically as she backpedaled her Chanel dress, suddenly looking more like a straitjacket. "I only meant..." "You meant exactly what you said." Celeste's voice cut through the tension like a scalpel. She stood gently moving Adrian's protective arm aside. The mark on her cheek had darkened to a fierce red, but her posture was regal. "The truth is, Patricia, you didn't care who I was. You saw a black woman daring to occupy your space, and that was enough." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. The elderly man from earlier stood again, his voice shaking with outrage. "I've watched you do this for years, Patricia. To waitstaff, to valets, to anyone you deemed beneath you." He turned to Adrian. "My law firm would be honored to represent Mrs. Williams pro bono." Patricia's breath came in short, panicked bursts. Then the death knell, the unmistakable sound of multiple phones buzzing simultaneously as a news alert blared through the restaurant. Hartwell Properties stock plummets 60% after Nexus Innovations terminates all contracts. CEO Charles Hartwell reportedly in SEC custody. The restaurant erupted. Waiters cheered. Diners stood to applaud. Patricia swayed on her feet, her manicured hands clutching at empty air as her socialite friends conspicuously looked away. Adrian pulled Celeste close, whispering something that made her laugh through her tears. Then he addressed the room with quiet authority. "For those wondering, yes, we'll be pressing charges." And yes, he added with a pointed look at the manager, we'll be reevaluating Nexus's investments in establishments that tolerate this behavior. As the police led a sobbing Patricia away, something remarkable happened. One by one, the restaurant staff began removing their ties and name tags, placing them on Patricia's abandoned table, in silent protest. The head chef emerged from the kitchen, carrying a plate of Celeste's favorite dessert, a towering chocolate soufflé with "We Stand With You" written in gold leaf. Celeste looked around at the sea of supportive faces, at Adrian's proud smile, at the crumbling remnants of Patricia's false kingdom. The sting on her cheek faded into insignificance, because in this moment she realized something powerful. The world was changing. And she, in her simple navy dress and payless shoes, had helped change it. The jazz music suddenly cut out, replaced by the sharp click of designer heels on marble. All heads turned as a statuesque black woman in a crimson power suit entered the dining room, flanked by two associates carrying briefcases. The collective gasp was audible. Everyone recognized the Lola Pierce, the most feared civil rights attorney in California. Actually, Lola said, her voice dripping with honeyed menace, "This isn't just assault." She dropped a thick legal folder onto Patricia's table with a thunderous slap. "This is a federal hate crime, and thanks to Spago's excellent security system." She tapped the folder. "We have 4 prior incidents of you using racial slurs against staff here. Class action material." Patricia made a sound like a deflating balloon. The manager looked ready to faint. Adrian's posture relaxed slightly as Lola took center stage. "Mrs. Williams," she said, turning to Celeste with unexpected warmth, "my firm has been building a case against the Hartwells for months. Your courage today just gave us the smoking gun we needed." She gestured to the cameras still rolling. "Would you be willing to be the lead plaintiff?" The restaurant erupted in cheers. Someone shouted, "Justice for Celeste." A busboy started a standing ovation. Patricia, now reduced to a trembling shell of her former self, reached desperately for Adrian's sleeve. "Please, my husband, our charities." Adrian shook her off like a bad smell. "Your charities were tax shelters. Your husband's been embezzling from pension funds." He nodded to Lola. "We've been tracking his offshore accounts since June." Celeste, watching Patricia's empire crumble in real time, felt something unexpected pity. Not for the woman herself, but for the hollow life she'd built on cruelty and pretense. "You could have just said hello," Celeste murmured. "Asked where I got this dress. We might have been friends." The poignancy of the moment shattered when a barista from the coffee counter burst through the kitchen doors, holding a whipped cream canister like a microphone. "Breaking news! Hartwell Properties just filed for bankruptcy. Twitter's calling it the Spago slap heard round the world." As the crowd went wild, Adrian pulled Celeste close, whispering in her ear, "Still want that In-N-Out burger." She laughed, the sound bright and free, while behind them, Patricia Hartwell finally gloriously fainted, face first into her $200 caviar appetizer. The air in Spago crackled with tension as Patricia's sobs echoed through the dining room. Then a new voice cut through the drama like a knife. "Mom." Every head swiveled toward the entrance, where a college-aged girl in a Black Lives Matter t-shirt stood frozen, her horrified gaze locked on Patricia's tear-streaked face. The family resemblance was unmistakable. Same sharp cheekbones, same icy blue eyes. But where Patricia radiated cruelty, this girl's expression held only shock and dawning disgust. "Emily, I can explain." Patricia reached for her daughter, but the girl recoiled like she'd been burned. "No, you can't." Emily's voice shook as she pulled out her phone. "I just watched the whole thing live. Everyone at USC is watching." She turned to Celeste, her eyes brimming with tears. "Mrs. Williams, I'm so sorry. My mother's a monster." Patricia made a strangled noise. "Darling, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly." Emily's shout silenced the room. "You've been lying to me my whole life. All those charity galas, the networking events. She threw her hands up. You're just a racist bully with a trust fund. The dam broke. Suddenly, every phone in the restaurant started pinging simultaneously. Twitter alerts, Instagram notifications, TikTok shares. The Spago slap was trending nationally. A busboy gasped. TMZ just posted the video with "Racist Karen gets owned" in all caps. Patricia swayed her designer dress, now looking more like a straitjacket. But the final blow came when the restaurant's vintage telephone rang an actual ringtone in this era of cell phones. The manager answered, then went pale. It's the James Beard Foundation. They're revoking our nomination over this incident. Adrian squeezed Celeste's hand. Ready to go, he murmured. I hear In and Out is still open. As they walked out past the cheering staff, the applauding diners, the utterly broken Patricia, being abandoned by her own daughter Celeste, realized something powerful. This wasn't just about one slap. It was about 1,000 tiny cuts she'd endured her whole life, finally being healed in the most public way possible. The last thing she heard before the doors closed was Emily shouting after them, Mrs. Williams, I'm interning at the ACLU this summer. Can I call you about testifying before Congress on hate crimes? Adrian chuckled as he opened the car door. Looks like you just got a new mentee. Celeste smiled, the sting on her cheek fading as something warmer took its place, hope. The world was changing one privileged racist at a time. And thanks to Patricia Hartwell's spectacular meltdown, that change just got a viral boost. The restaurant's crystal chandeliers seemed to dim as Celeste's words hung in the air. Then a sharp gasp from the kitchen doors. The entire waitstaff had gathered in solidarity, their aprons now bearing handwritten signs, We stand with Celeste. The head chef, a burly man with tattooed arms, stepped forward, holding a dessert plate with Black Lives Matter written in chocolate sauce. Patricia looked around wildly, but found no allies, only phones recording her downfall and faces reflecting disgust. Even her usual table of society friends had turned their chairs away in silent protest. Adrian's phone buzzed with a notification. He glanced at it, then showed Celeste the screen Hartwell Properties stock had plummeted 78% in after-hours trading. The ticker symbol flashed red like a warning light. Wait! Patricia's manicured hand shot out as Celeste stood. I'll give you money. Name your price. A donation to whatever charity you That's your problem. Celeste interrupted, her voice steady as she adjusted her simple navy dress. You think everything has a price. She took Adrian's arm. But some things, like basic human decency. She looked pointedly at Patricia's diamond bracelet. Not even Harry Winston can sell that. As they turned to leave, the restaurant's owner rushed forward with 2 to-go bags. Complimentary, he said, bowing slightly. The truffle risotto you love, Mrs. Williams. And, he lowered his voice, the entire kitchen staff would like to invite you back for a private dinner. We're renaming the tasting menu the Celeste. Outside, paparazzi flashes exploded like fireworks, but Celeste barely noticed them. Her attention caught by something more surprising. A group of young black teens gathered by the valet stand, their faces alight with admiration. One girl held up a handmade sign. Thank you for fighting back. Adrian squeezed her hand. Still want that In and Out, he murmured. Celeste laughed, the sound bright and free. Only if we take these kids with us. She gestured to the group. Their burgers are on the Billionaire who just proved love beats hate every time. As their car pulled away, the last thing they saw was Patricia Hartwell standing alone on the sidewalk, her designer dress, her social status, her entire carefully constructed world crumbling around her. The empire of cruelty had fallen, and in its place, something far more powerful had taken root. The restaurant had become so silent you could hear ice cubes melting in abandoned drinks. Then a slow clap began from the kitchen doors. The entire waitstaff stood in formation, their applause building as the head chef stepped forward, holding a plate with "Role Model" written in chocolate sauce. Patricia's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, her designer-clad frame shrinking under the weight of Celeste's truth. Across the room, a young black busboy discreetly wiped his eyes with his apron. Adrian wasn't finished. He pulled out his phone and projected a live feed onto the restaurant's wine display screen, showing Celeste's Detroit students holding up handwritten signs, "We love Mrs. Williams," and "Black girls belong everywhere." "That's Ms. Jackson's third-grade class," Celeste whispered, her voice breaking. "They stayed after school to make those." The elderly man who'd first defended Celeste stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly. "Mrs. Hartwell," he said, his voice shaking with outrage, "you owe this remarkable woman more than an apology. You owe her your gratitude." He turned to the stunned diners. "Who here has benefited from a teacher like Mrs. Williams, a mentor who saw your potential when no one else did?" Hands rose throughout the room, a prominent judge, a TV producer, even the restaurant's sommelier. The movement spread like wildfire as people began sharing stories of educators who'd changed their lives. Then the mic drop moment. The restaurant doors burst open to reveal a breathless news crew. "We're live with breaking news," the reporter announced. "Nexus Innovations just pledged $50 million to Detroit public schools in Mrs. Williams's name." Patricia made a sound like a deflating balloon as the room erupted in cheers. But the real victory came when Adrian took Celeste's hand and said loud enough for the cameras to catch, "No donation can match what you've already given these kids, love, but it's a start." As they walked out past the applauding staff, the tearful diners, the utterly shattered Patricia Celeste realized something profound. That navy dress Patricia had mocked. It would hang in the Detroit Historical Museum one day right next to the photo of this moment, not as a symbol of oppression, but as armor in a battle she'd won without ever raising her voice. The restaurant's air seemed to vibrate with raw emotion as Adrian's words settled over the crowd. Then an unexpected sound cut through the silence, a single pair of hands clapping from the back of the room. All heads turned to see a young black woman in a Spago server's uniform stepping forward, her eyes shining. "I was one of those at-risk kids," she said, her voice trembling. "Mrs. Williams's literacy program saved my life." She held up a battered copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. The spine cracked from repeated readings. "This was the first book I ever finished. Because of her." Like dominoes falling, others began standing. A sous chef wiping his hands on his apron. "Her foundation paid my GED fees." A businesswoman at the corner table. "She tutored my son every Saturday for free." Even the valet stepping inside. "Mrs. W. got me into community college." Patricia shrank further into her chair, her designer dress suddenly looking cheap under the weight of these testimonies. But the knockout punch came when the restaurant's pastry chef, a white woman in her 60s, walked over and deliberately removed her toque, placing it on Celeste's table like a tribute. "I voted for Hartwell in the last election," she announced. "Never again." Adrian squeezed Celeste's hand as the room erupted in applause. Then the mic drop. His phone buzzed with a notification. He showed it to Celeste first. Celeste Williams was now trending above Oscars on Twitter. The screen flashed with thousands of tweets, photos of people posting their favorite books tagged, "Because of Celeste." Patricia made one last desperate grab for Adrian's sleeve. "Please, my daughter's wedding is next month." "That's the tragedy, Patricia," Celeste said softly, standing to leave. "You had every advantage, every opportunity to be kind." She adjusted her simple dress with quiet dignity. "And still, you chose this." As they walked out, the entire staff formed an honor guard, their applause following Celeste into the night. The last thing Patricia Hartwell heard before the doors closed was the pastry chef calling out, "Order up 1 humble pie, extra crow, for table 12. And just like that, the queen of Beverly Hills society became a cautionary tale, while the woman in the navy dress from Target became a legend. The manager's hands trembled as he pulled out an envelope from his jacket. "Mr. Williams? Mrs. Williams, we anticipated you might say that." He slid a document across the table. "The ownership papers. Spago Beverly Hills is now officially part of the Nexus Foundation's Dining for Literacy program. Every meal served here will fund reading programs in underserved communities." A stunned silence fell over the restaurant, then the sound of a single champagne cork popping. The head sommelier approached with 2 flutes of vintage Dom Perignon. "From the cellar," he said with a small bow, "for the new owners." Celeste's eyes widened as she turned to Adrian. "You bought the restaurant." "Not me," Adrian corrected, nodding toward the staff. "We did. The employees pooled their tips to make the first donation." He squeezed her hand. "Turns out you've been inspiring people long before tonight." Patricia, forgotten in her corner, made a strangled noise as the reality of her situation fully sank in. Not only had she'd lost to the very people she'd spent a lifetime looking down on. Then came the final humiliation. The restaurant's doors swung open to reveal Patricia's own husband, Charles Hartwell. His tailored suit rumpled his face, ashen. "Patricia," he croaked, holding up his phone with the Spago slap trending worldwide. "The board just voted me out. Our assets are frozen." As Charles collapsed into a chair, the pastry chef, the same one who'd served Patricia for years, approached with a single cupcake. The frosting read, "Karma's a B." She dropped it on Patricia's table with a clatter. Compliments of the staff, Adrian stood helping Celeste to her feet. "Shall we go home?" he murmured, brushing a kiss to her uninjured cheek. Celeste nodded, but not before turning to address the room one last time. "To everyone who stood up tonight, thank you. But this isn't just about me." She gestured to the young black servers, the Latino busboys, the immigrant kitchen staff. "It's about making sure no one ever feels unwelcome here again." As they walked out, the entire staff lined up to shake Celeste's hand, not as victims thanking a savior, but as partners in a revolution that started with something as simple as a woman in a navy dress refusing to be moved. And the last thing Patricia Hartwell heard before the doors closed was the sound of her own social obituary being written in the clink of champagne glasses, toasting the new era at Spago. The silence in Spago was so profound you could hear the ice machines humming in the bar. Then a sharp click as the pastry chef turned on the kitchen's overhead speakers, piping Celeste's words live to the packed patio outside. Celeste didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Every syllable carried the weight of truth. Tonight wasn't about me versus Patricia. It was about decency versus cruelty. She gestured to the young black hostess trembling by the door. "How many times has someone like Maya been treated this way and had no one to defend her?" Maya burst into tears as the entire waitstaff surged forward in solidarity. The restaurant's owner, who'd been watching silently from the shadows, stepped forward with a microphone. "Mrs. Williams is right," he announced. "Starting tonight, Spago implements a zero-tolerance policy. Any guest who disrespects staff or other patrons based on race, class, or appearance will be permanently banned." The applause was deafening, but the real victory came when the mayor of Beverly Hills himself stood up from his corner table, adjusting his tie for the cameras. "And any business that won't adopt this policy," he declared, "will lose their city operating license." Patricia made a strangled noise, her manicured fingers clawing at the tablecloth. "You can't." "Oh, we can," the mayor interrupted. "In fact," he pulled out his phone. "The city council just voted unanimously to rename Hartwell Park after Mrs. Williams's Literacy Foundation." As the room erupted again, Adrian leaned down to whisper in Celeste's ear, "Still want to keep that quiet anniversary dinner reservation." Celeste laughed, a bright, joyful sound that cut through the tension like sunlight. "Actually," she said loud enough for the recording phones to catch, I think we should celebrate right here, with everyone who stood up tonight. She turned to the kitchen staff. Chef, could you make family-style portions for the whole restaurant? We're all eating together. The head chef grinned, snapping his fingers at his team. You heard Mrs. Williams fire up the grill. We're throwing a damn party. And as the music swelled and strangers became friends across the linen-clad tables, Patricia Hartwell slipped out unnoticed, her designer heels clicking hollowly against the pavement, her social empire reduced to ashes behind her. The last thing she saw before the door closed was Celeste surrounded by new allies dancing in her simple navy dress to a song called Respect. Some revolutions, it turned out, didn't need marches or protests. Sometimes all they needed was one unshakable woman and the courage to say, "This stops with me." The restaurant held its breath as Patricia's perfectly manicured fingers dug into the tablecloth. Then, an unexpected voice cut through the tension. "I'll supervise her volunteer work." All heads turned to the kitchen doors where the elderly dishwasher, a Haitian immigrant named Jean-Paul, stood drying his hands on his apron. "My church runs a literacy program in Compton," he said, his deep voice resonating with quiet authority. "We get kids who walk through bullet fire just to read a book. Maybe Mrs. High Society needs to see that." Patricia's mouth fell open. "You expect me to—" "Yes." Celeste's single word carried finality. "You'll go where Jean-Paul says when he says. No personal assistance, no designer clothes, just you and the real world you've spent a lifetime avoiding." Adrian's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then showed it to Celeste. A live CNN headline, "Billionaire's wife turns racist, slap into national teachable moment." Below it, trending higher, literacy, not lip service. Then, the twist no one saw coming. The restaurant doors burst open to reveal Patricia's college-age daughter, Emily, her face streaked with tears. "Mom, I just resigned from the junior league." She held up her phone, showing a viral TikTok of Patricia's slap. "Our entire sorority voted to disassociate from the Hartwell name." Patricia made a sound like a wounded animal as Emily walked straight to Celeste. "Mrs. Williams, I'd like to volunteer too. Maybe if I'd spoken up sooner." Celeste embraced the shaking girl. "It's never too late to do good," she murmured, just as Patricia's diamond tennis bracelet finally snapped, scattering beads of privilege across the floor. The pastry chef, the same one Patricia had berated for years over creme brulee imperfections, stepped forward with a single cupcake. The frosting read, "Eat humble pie." She dropped it in front of Patricia with a clatter. "Compliments of the kitchen staff." As the crowd erupted in applause, Adrian whispered in Celeste's ear, "Still want to keep our 8 p.m. reservation." Celeste surveyed the scene, the diverse staff standing tall, the wealthy diners wiping their eyes, the broken socialite facing her reckoning. She squeezed her husband's hand. "Let's stay. I think we just found our anniversary dinner guests." And as the kitchen staff brought out family-style platters for everyone, the most exclusive restaurant in Beverly Hills transformed into something far more extraordinary, a place where for one night at least, everyone truly belonged. Patricia's manicured nails dug into the tablecloth as she straightened her spine, her voice dripping with renewed venom. "From some charity case who married up, please. My family built this city, while yours was—" The slap echoed before anyone saw it coming. Emily Hartwell stood trembling, her hand still raised. "Enough, Mother." The words came out in a choked whisper. "I just got off the phone with Daddy. The board voted him out. Our assets are frozen. That text you got," she pointed to Patricia's phone, "was our accountant resigning." The restaurant gasped as one. Patricia's face went sheet white. "That's impossible. Not impossible." The elderly dishwasher Jean-Paul stepped forward holding a kitchen tablet. On screen flashed a TMZ headline, "Hartwell Empire Collapses After Spago Slap Goes Viral." Below it, A live ticker showed Hartwell Properties stock plummeting to zero. Adrian's phone buzzed with a notification. He showed it to Celeste. A CNN alert. Nexus Innovations announces full acquisition of Hartwell assets will convert all properties to affordable housing and community centers. Patricia swayed on her heels, her designer dress suddenly looking as cheap as her dignity. But the final blow came from an unexpected corner. The young black hostess Maya stepped forward, holding a single sheet of paper. "Mrs. Hartwell," she said, her voice steady, despite the tears in her eyes. "The Beverly Hills Women's Club just emailed. You've been removed as chairperson. They voted Mrs. Williams as your replacement." As Patricia collapsed into her chair, the pastry chef emerged with one last dessert, a single scoop of vanilla ice cream in a plain dish. "Compliments of the kitchen," she said quietly. "We hear it helps with burns." She placed it carefully in front of Celeste, especially the kind left by falling empires. Celeste took Adrian's hand as they turned to leave. Behind them, the sounds of Spago Beverly Hills returning to normal laughter. Clinking glasses, the jazz band, striking up a new tune, formed the perfect soundtrack to Patricia Hartwell's social obituary. The revolution wouldn't be televised. It had already been live-streamed. The restaurant's air grew thick with tension as Patricia's words hung between them. Then a sharp, unexpected laugh cut through the silence. Celeste wasn't crying. She was laughing, a rich, full-bodied sound that made Patricia's sneer falter. "Oh, Patricia," Celeste said, wiping her eyes. "You really can't help yourself, can you?" She reached into her simple clutch and pulled out a worn leather wallet, the same one she'd carried since college. With deliberate slowness, she removed a yellowed receipt and unfolded it. "This is from the Westwood Cafe, dated 3 years ago. See that coffee stain? That's from when Adrian knocked over his latte because he was too busy staring at me to watch what he was doing." The crowd murmured as she passed it to the nearest table. The receipt made its way around the room, 4.75, for a single coffee paid in exact change. Then came the mic drop. Jean-Paul the dishwasher stepped forward holding his phone. On screen played security footage from that very cafe showing a younger Celeste in her thrift store dress completely ignoring Adrian as he practically tripped over himself trying to get her attention. "Funny thing about positioning yourself," Celeste said sweetly. "Real life isn't one of your country club romances. Sometimes billionaires fall for literacy teachers because," she turned to Adrian, her voice softening, "because they see the real person underneath." Adrian took her hand, his thumb brushing over her wedding band, the simple silver one she'd refused to upgrade. "Best $4.75 I ever spent," he declared loud enough for the recording phones to catch. Patricia opened her mouth to retaliate, but the sound that came out wasn't words, it was a gasp. Her phone had lit up with a breaking news alert. Hartwell family disowned by Beverly Hills Elite Country Club membership revoked. As she stared at the screen in horror, the restaurant's maitre d' approached with a silver platter. On it sat a single item, Patricia's previously lost diamond bracelet, now engraved with one word in tiny letters along the clasp, Karma. The pastry chef's voice rang out from the kitchen. "Order up 1 serving of poetic justice. Extra crispy." And with that, Patricia Hartwell's reign of terror ended not with a whimper, but with the collective laughter of an entire restaurant and the sound of a billionaire's wife ordering another coffee black, just like she'd always taken it. The silence in Spago was suffocating as Patricia's words slithered through the air. Then a sharp clink as Celeste set down her water glass with deliberate calm. "You want to know what I've sacrificed?" Celeste's voice cut through the tension like a scalpel. She reached into her simple clutch and pulled out a folded sheet of paper, the original prenup she'd insisted on drafting before marrying Adrian. The crowd gasped as she smoothed it on the table, revealing her signature next to a single staggering clause. Celeste Williams retains no claim to any Nexus assets acquired before or during this marriage. Adrian's face went pale. You kept this? Of course. Celeste turned to Patricia, her eyes blazing. Unlike you, I don't measure my worth in designer labels or bank statements, but since you're so obsessed with money, she nodded to Jean-Paul, who tapped the kitchen tablet. The screen lit up with real-time transfers, millions flowing from Celeste's personal account to Detroit literacy programs. Every cent Adrian ever gifted me, it goes here. My luxury lifestyle. She gestured to her thrifted dress. Try again. Patricia opened her mouth, but the sound that came out wasn't words. It was a choked gasp. The restaurant screen suddenly switched to a live press conference, Hartwell Properties Board, announcing Patricia's immediate removal from all family trusts due to irreparable reputational damage. Then came the knockout punch. Emily Hartwell stepped forward, holding her phone aloft. On screen, a teenage girl in a Detroit classroom holding up a dog-eared copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. Mrs. Williams, the girl said, her voice trembling, I just got into Howard University because of you. The dam broke. One by one, staff members began removing their ties and name tags, placing them at Celeste's feet in silent tribute. The pastry chef emerged with a single cupcake. The frosting read, Integrity Priceless. As the room erupted in applause, Adrian pulled Celeste close. Remind me never to argue with you, he murmured against her hair. I'd lose every time. Patricia, now utterly alone, made one last desperate lunge for her phone, only to find it displaying the final nail in her coffin, a Google search auto-completing her name with racist and gold digger before she could even finish typing. The revolution wouldn't be televised. It was already trending. And as Celeste took Adrian's hand and walked out of Spago, she realized something powerful. The only thing stronger than hate was love, and hers had just gone viral. The restaurant's air grew thick as Celeste stepped back from Adrian, her simple navy dress suddenly feeling like armor. Then a sound no one expected. Laughter. Celeste wasn't crying. She was laughing, a rich, unapologetic sound that made Patricia's smirk falter. Oh, Patricia, she said, wiping her eyes. You really don't get it, do you? With deliberate slowness, she reached into her clutch and pulled out a battered composition book, the same one she'd carried since her first day teaching in Detroit. The pages fell open to a familiar sketch, a coffee-stained drawing of Adrian's flustered face from their cafe meeting captioned, Weird Rich Guy Won't Stop Staring, 9/14. Adrian's breath caught. You kept this, of course. Celeste turned to Patricia, her voice steady as steel. Unlike you, I don't need validation from strangers to know my own worth. She flipped to another page, a budget ledger showing every cent Adrian had ever gifted her, meticulously donated to literacy programs. My calculated love. Try $3.8 million given away last year alone. The room erupted in gasps as Jean-Paul projected Celeste's foundation reports onto the restaurant screens. Thousands of children's lives changed all, while Patricia was busy counting her diamonds. Then came the mic drop. Emily Hartwell stepped forward, her phone broadcasting live to 2 million TikTok followers. Mrs. Williams. A young black girl appeared on screen standing in front of a Detroit community center. They named our new library after you today. Patricia made a strangled noise as the restaurant staff began lining up not to serve, but to stand behind Celeste in silent solidarity. The pastry chef placed a single cupcake in front of Patricia. The frosting read, Eat humble pie, in perfect cursive. Adrian took Celeste's hand, his voice breaking. I never doubted you for a... I know, Celeste interrupted softly. But the world needs to see this. She turned to the cameras. Not for me, for every girl who's ever been told she doesn't belong. As they walked out, the last thing Patricia heard was the sound of her own social obituary being written in the clink of champagne glasses, toasting Celeste's foundation. and the deafening silence of a room that had finally chosen sides. Some revolutions weren't fought with weapons, but with receipts. And Celeste Williams, she kept every single one. The silence in Spago was deafening as Celeste's words settled over the room. Then, an unexpected sound shattered the tension. A single pair of hands clapping slowly, deliberately. All heads turned to see Jean-Paul, the Haitian dishwasher, standing by the kitchen doors, his work-roughened hands coming together in a steady rhythm. "I know that tired," he said in his deep baritone. "The tired of 1,000 sideways glances. The tired of always being the exception." He stepped forward, removing his apron to reveal a faded Howard University sweatshirt. "But Mrs. Williams, you don't get to quit." The restaurant's head chef, a burly Italian man with tattoos of his grandmother's recipes, joined the applause. "Damn right. You think my nonna belonged when she opened her first diner in 1953. He pointed to Celeste's untouched dessert. That tiramisu, her recipe. Now it's on every menu in Beverly Hills. Like dominoes falling, others rose. The young black hostess removing her name tag to reveal a black girls' code. T-shirt underneath the elderly Jewish couple at table 12, holding up photos of their civil rights marches. Even the valet raising his keys. "You think these rich folks ever thought a kid from Compton would park their Bentleys?" Adrian's eyes shone as he took Celeste's hands. "You're right, love. You don't belong in my world." He gestured to the standing crowd. "We belong in yours." Then the mic drop moment. The restaurant doors burst open to reveal Celeste's Detroit students, their bus idling outside. In unison, they held up signs, "Our world has room for you," and "Teacher, come home." Patricia made a strangled noise as her phone buzzed violently. Hartwell Properties' final stock alert flashing 0 before shutting off forever. Celeste looked around at the sea of faces, black-white immigrant privileged, all standing together. The crack in her chest didn't heal so much as transform, becoming space for something new. She turned to Adrian with the ghost of a smile. "Maybe we build a new world instead." As they walked out hand in hand, the entire restaurant erupted in cheers, not for the billionaire and his wife, but for the teacher and her students. And the last thing Patricia Hartwell saw before the doors closed was her own reflection in a champagne flute, distorted and small as the toast rang out. "To new beginning." The elderly man's words hung in the air like a benediction. Then the sharp sound of a chair scraping back. Patricia stood abruptly, her designer bag tumbling to the floor, spilling its contents across the marble. A compact mirror shattered, reflecting her fractured image in a dozen pieces. "You're all fools," she hissed. "She's playing you just like she played." "Enough." The voice came from the restaurant's entrance. All heads turned to see Charles Hartwell, Patricia's husband. His tailored suit rumpled his face, ashen. In his shaking hands, he held a single sheet of paper, the SEC indictment against him, already trending online with Hartwell collapse. Patricia's breath came in short, panicked bursts. "Charles, tell them, it's over." Charles's voice broke. "The board voted unanimously. We've lost everything." He looked at Celeste with something resembling awe. "Our biggest investor just pulled out to fund your Detroit literacy initiative." The restaurant erupted. Waiters cheered. Diners stood to applaud. But the real victory came when Adrian dropped to one knee, not to propose, but to meet Celeste eye to eye. "I was wrong," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Not about loving you, but about how to love you." With deliberate hands, he unbuttoned his $10,000 Tom Ford jacket and removed it, revealing a faded Detroit Literacy Volunteers t-shirt underneath. "This is who I fell in love with. The woman who wore this shirt every Saturday to tutor kids." Celeste's hands flew to her mouth as Adrian reached into his pocket and produced a small velvet box. Inside wasn't jewelry, but a key. "To our new home," he whispered, "in Detroit, where you belong, where we'll build that world together." As they embraced the pastry, Chef emerged with one final dessert, a simple vanilla cupcake with chocolate frosting spelling out "home" in perfect cursive. Patricia's choked sob went unnoticed as the entire restaurant erupted into a standing ovation. The last thing she saw before being escorted out was Celeste, no longer a woman torn between worlds, but one who had finally found where she truly belonged, surrounded by love, by community, and by the unshakable knowledge that some things no amount of money could buy. The moment Celeste stepped forward, the entire restaurant erupted, not in applause, but in action. The head chef ripped off his toque and pulled out his phone. "Chefs United for Detroit," he barked into the speaker. "I need 20 volunteers for weekly cooking classes at the Brightmoor Community Center." The sommelier raised a bottle of champagne, a toast to new scholarship funds, all proceeds from tonight's wine sales. Even the valet jumped in. "I'm starting a driver's ed program for foster kids." Patricia, forgotten in the corner, made a strangled noise as her phone buzzed with the final death knell, a TMZ alert showing her own daughter Emily on the steps of City Hall, announcing the Celeste Williams Literacy Act with the mayor. Adrian didn't say a word. He simply took off his platinum Rolex and placed it on the table, then rolled up his sleeves. "Where do we start, Mrs. Williams?" Celeste laughed the carefree, full-bodied laugh of a woman finally stepping into her power and pulled out her phone. "First, we call Detroit." She tapped the screen, revealing a live feed of her former classroom where students held up a banner, "Teacher, we saved your desk." As they walked out hand in hand, the entire staff lined up not to say goodbye, but to hand Celeste envelopes resignation letters from Spago, each one with a postscript, "Hire us when you open your community restaurant." The last thing Patricia Hartwell saw before the doors closed was her reflection in a discarded champagne flute, distorted, insignificant, and utterly alone, while through the window, Celeste and Adrian stood surrounded by their new, unlikely family, bathed in golden California sunlight. Some stories ended with happily ever after. This one was just getting started. The restaurant erupted in gasps as Adrian pulled out his phone, revealing a live press conference from City Hall. On screen, the mayor stood beside Celeste's former students announcing Nexus Innovations has chosen Detroit for its new global headquarters, bringing 10,000 jobs and a $500 million community investment. Patricia's knees buckled. You can't." "Oh, but we can," Celeste said, stepping forward. "And we did." She nodded to the security team. "But first, there's someone who'd like to meet you." The kitchen doors swung open, revealing a petite black woman in a neatly pressed pantsuit. Detroit Police Chief Elaine Carter. "Patricia Hartwell," she said, holding up a badge, "you're under arrest for assault. And as for your husband..." She nodded to the screens where federal agents were escorting Charles Hartwell out of his office in handcuffs. "SEC just raided Hartwell Properties for fraud." As Chief Carter read Patricia her rights, the restaurant staff lined up to watch, not with schadenfreude, but with quiet satisfaction. The pastry chef handed Patricia one last dessert, a single scoop of vanilla ice cream in a paper cup. "For the road," she said sweetly. Compliments of the kitchen. Adrian turned to Celeste, his eyes shining. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Williams." Celeste looked around at the cheering staff, the tearful diners, the students on screen celebrating their future. "Yes," she said, taking his hand. "Let's go home to Detroit." As they walked out, the entire restaurant burst into an impromptu rendition of "Ain't No Mountain High Enough," the song Celeste's students had sung at their wedding. The last thing Patricia Hartwell heard before the doors closed was the sound of her own social obituary being written in the key of joy. Some falls from grace were slow. Hers took exactly 60 seconds, the same amount of time it had taken Celeste Williams to change the world. The moment stretched As Celeste took in the transformed dining room, the staff standing shoulder to shoulder, the diners raising their glasses in solidarity, even the jazz band striking up respect in a spontaneous tribute. Then a sharp gasp from the doorway. All heads turned to see Patricia's daughter, Emily, pushing through the crowd with her phone held high. On screen, a live news feed showing Hartwell Properties headquarters being raided by federal agents. "It's over, Mother," Emily said, her voice shaking with resolve. "The board just voted you and Dad out entirely." Patricia made a sound like a wounded animal as the security team tightened their grip. But the real knockout punch came when Emily turned to Celeste and Adrian. "Mr. and Mrs. Williams, I'd like to donate my trust fund to your Detroit Literacy Initiative. Every last penny." The restaurant erupted. Waiters cheered. Diners stood to applaud. Even the stoic security guards blinked back tears as Emily handed her mother a single Metro bus pass, the same one Celeste had used for years traveling to her classroom before walking away. Adrian squeezed Celeste's hand. "Ready to go start that new world." Celeste looked around at the sea of faces, black, white, rich working class, all united in this moment. The crack in her heart didn't heal so much as transform, becoming space for something new. "Yes," she said, smiling through her tears. "But first," she turned to the kitchen staff. "Who's coming to Detroit with us? We'll need chefs for the community kitchen." As every hand in the room shot up, Patricia's final whimper was drowned out by the sound of change being born. The revolution wouldn't be televised. It was already here. And its name was Celeste Williams. The clink of silverware and murmur of conversation gradually returned to Spago, but the air had changed, charged with possibility. Celeste reached across the table to squeeze Adrian's hand just as the kitchen doors swung open. The entire waitstaff emerged carrying a towering cake, 3 tiers of chocolate ganache, decorated with edible pages from classic novels. The head chef stepped forward with a proud grin. "From your new staff, Mrs. Williams. We all just quit." Celeste's eyes widened as 20 employees placed their aprons at her feet. "We're coming to Detroit," the pastry chef declared. "Someone's got to teach those kids how to make proper soufflés." Adrian burst out laughing as his phone buzzed with notifications CNN Forbes, even the White House requesting comment on their surprise Detroit relocation. But the real miracle was scrolling across the restaurant screen's Celeste's classroom, trending globally, with donations flooding in from every continent. As they toasted with champagne flutes, Celeste's filled with sparkling cider, as always the elderly gentleman from earlier approached with a gift, his late wife's first edition of To Kill a Mockingbird. "For your new library," he said, eyes shining. "She would have loved you." Outside, paparazzi flashes exploded like fireworks, but Celeste barely noticed. Her gaze was fixed on the text lighting up her phone, a photo from her Detroit students gathered in their half-built community center, holding a hand-painted banner, "Mrs. Williams World Changers Academy, EST Today." Patricia Hartwell's fall from grace would make headlines for weeks. But in this moment, as Adrian leaned in to whisper, "I told you you belonged everywhere," Celeste realized something profound. The most exclusive tables weren't in Beverly Hills. They were the ones you built yourself with love as the foundation and room for everyone who dared to pull up a chair.